Well, it's my privilege to go ahead and tell you about Randy, who is here today. I've been excited about his coming ever since he agreed way back last spring to come. Randy is a science teacher at William Jessup University, and so it's not a surprise that he's going to share some scientific truths with us today. He said, well, even as a child, that he was interested in the stars and the planets and in science in general. And the older he got, the more his interest grew. And we will hear some about that.
Why do astronomers love August 12th? Somebody want to volunteer for me? What happens August 12th every year, besides 2 days before my wedding anniversary? The Perseid meteor shower. And when I was a kid, my parents would take us up into the hills. We lived in Hillsburg, California, and we had a hunting lodge or a hunting area that we would go near Boonville, California, where it was very, very dark and very, very clear. We'd go up on a mountainside, lay out a blanket, and watch the Perseid meteor shower. And the Perseid meteor shower, in many ways, is the best meteor shower of the year because it has up to 200 meteors per hour. That's one every minute and a half, or less than every minute, like 3 a minute. And it's dependable and it's warm that time of year. But one of the most amazing things is you can see the Milky Way that time of year. So we were sitting out there with my family and we would sing How Great Thou Art and sit on our backs and watch the meteor shower. And that's one of my first memories of just understanding the grandeur of the skies and what's there. And it was just an amazing time for our family to enjoy that. And as I got a little bit older, I began to understand. Go ahead and show me the first one. This is just a picture of the meteors and the Milky Way. By the way, you'd be amazed how many students have never seen the Milky Way. How many of you guys have ever seen the Milky Way? Hopefully all you. But if I were to ask that same class that question to my students at Jessup, most of them, or maybe half of them, would have never seen it. That's because they live in cities. In cities now, you have the light that blocks that out. Matter of fact, a funny story, the Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles back in the 90s, they had over 100, and I'm not sure these numbers are right, but they had a bunch of people call the police station to report a strange glow in the sky. Because during the Northridge earthquake, all the electricity was off, and people were told not to sleep in their homes because their homes might be damaged. And so they were sleeping outside and for the first time saw a strange glow and thought something was wrong. But the Milky Way is amazing. But it's a message from God to us, I believe. But anyway, let's talk about meteors for a second. What are meteors? Meteors are little grains of rock and dust and sand that are left over in a trail from a comet. So this particular meteor shower, and let's get the next slide. This is actually a picture from last night. I didn't take that, but a friend did. And you can see the Milky Way, and then you can see the meteor. And that is a piece of dust, probably about the same size as a grape nut. So if you can imagine how size a grape nut is, moving, in the case of the Perseids, about 30 miles per second. So that's from here to Elk Grove in 1 second. Okay, so that's pretty fast. So what happens to something moving that fast when it hits our atmosphere is it burns up and it leaves a streak in the sky. And that's what creates these. And in truth, each one of these meteor showers, and we have more than a dozen of them per year, although this is one of the two best, and because it happens in the summer under the Milky Way, I consider it the best. What those are leftover trails from a comet. And think of a comet as a dirty snowball. You guys have all seen, before we lived here, we lived in Reno, Nevada. And in Reno, there was snow. And what they would do is they would push all the snow into the corner of the parking lots. And so even after it wasn't cold anymore, sometimes there was this big pile of snow. And of course, the snow wasn't pure. It was all mixed in with rocks and dust. And imagine that pile as being a comet. So a comet is sometimes up to 3 or 5 miles in diameter of a dirty snowball. And what happens is, as it moves in around the sun heats it up. And it starts shedding some of that gas, and it starts shedding some of those little piles of rocks. And that's what creates the tail behind a comet. Let's get the next slide. This is the comet that created or creates on a regular basis, it renews it, the Perseid meteor shower. It's called the comet Swift-Tuttle. It comes around every 133 years, and it zips in around the sun where it heats up, leaves more dust behind, and then goes back out. It came back the last time in 1992. And naked eye comets are very, very rare. How many of you know what happened just last month that was very rare? It only happens about every 30 years. What happened? My wife knows, because she helped me find it. Actually, she was able to see it with her naked eye, and she pointed out where it was so I could get it in the telescope. And I'll show you a picture of it later. It was Comet Neowise, and it was a naked eye comet that we could see with your naked eye. And some of these comets are so far out. This one only goes out to about the orbit of Pluto, which is hard to imagine how far that is, but Pluto is 50 times further from the sun than we are. So that's about how far this goes out, and then it slowly turns around and drops back and speeds up and whips around the sun and then goes back out where it started. And it does that every 133 years. Okay, what's the most famous comet? Okay, everybody says Halley's. I point out to my students that he called himself Halley. But Halley's comet happens every 82 years. And, no, not 82, 72 years. And famously, Mark Twain said, I came in with Halley's Comet and I'll go out with it. And he did. He was born in the year it came, and then he died in the year when it came again. And anyway, that one comes around, and that one leaves a trail of dust that we see in May and October with 2 different meteor showers during that time. So anyway, that's what these comets are. And that was one of my first memories of looking at the sky and appreciating what's there. Okay, so I want to share that. Okay, go to the next slide. And when I became a young man, I went out and bought a telescope that probably cost me $20, and I would laugh at now, but it was the best I had at the time. It was one of these ones that was about that big around on a shaky mount, and I was able to look up at the sky and see that. Of course, it didn't look like that. It looked just like kind of an oblong star, but I could tell it had a ring around it. And one of the things that enhanced that, and this is so true of astronomy in general, is realizing what it is you're looking at. So even though in my little eyepiece, it didn't look nearly as good as it did in a magazine or an encyclopedia, to me, I said, wow, that was amazing. This is something that God created that's incredible. Go to the next slide. In the next slide, I looked at that, and that's the Andromeda Galaxy. The Andromeda Galaxy is the closest galaxy to us that is a large size, and they think it's similar to the Milky Way in terms of size and complexity. And to me, it was just a little smudge in the sky. But in my head, I was able to see that, which is pretty amazing. And then as I got older, I got better telescopes and I learned more. And the more you learn about something, the more you can appreciate it. And those of you who've studied birds or flowers or anything understand that the more you understand about the science or the logic behind it, the better it helps you understand it. And that's what I was able to do as I did that. So anyway, I want to go through a little bit, go ahead, next slide, and talk to you about what I call 3 slides or 3 pictures that changed our view of the universe. Okay, most of you have seen this one. Who wants to volunteer where that was taken from and when it was taken? Okay, in the back. Okay, close. It's Apollo 8, which didn't land on the moon, but orbited the moon. And they were busy taking pictures of the moon itself to try to find a landing spot, which ultimately became Apollo 11, and where they landed. And the astronaut happened to look up, and he saw that, and he took that picture. And it's called Earth Rising. And it was released in 1968, and on Christmas Day of 1968, they put the astronauts on, and over 1 billion people heard them read Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. And that helped us to realize that all of us, all of history, every person who's ever lived is on that little ball, and how precious it is. Okay, next slide. This slide was taken in 1978. I wish I'd brought my laser pointer because it's going to be hard to see. But if you could see below the rings, there's a little dot. Okay, what is that dot? In the back, I'm sure you know again, but what would you guess? Harry, what's that dot? That dot is Earth again. Okay, but it's not taken from the moon, it's taken from outside the orbit of Saturn. Okay, that was the Voyager spacecraft taken in 1978. It turned around and shot a picture back at Earth. And that is that picture. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a blow-up of that. And that last one was a little bit enhanced, but if you can see this little dot here, and this is more the normal size, again, that is Earth. And again, realizing how tiny we are in comparison to everything else. Okay, and so that was what they called the pale blue dot picture. Okay, so anyway, that's pretty amazing. Okay, and then the third picture was in the year 1996, and we had just put the Hubble Space Telescope up, and the Hubble was pretty amazing. Let's go to the next slide. And Hubble allowed us, it wasn't the biggest telescope ever, but it did something that no telescope had done before, and that is it took us out of our atmosphere. And it was able to see the sky without having to look through this hazy atmosphere. If you've ever been swimming in the bottom of a swimming pool and look up and see somebody walking around the pool, how clear is that? Not very, right? Well, that's kind of what astronomy on Earth is like. We can't see clearly the skies because we're looking through this veil of Earth. Well, the Hubble, for the first time, was up in space and was able to take pictures. And not only that, it wasn't rotating around the Earth in such a way that it only had 12 hours of light. They were able to take Hubble and take pictures where they focused on one area of the sky for multiple days. And what they did is they picked a spot in the sky the size of a grain of sand held at the end of your arm, as far as you can hold it out. And they picked that and they said, we don't think there's anything there. Let's take a picture and we're going to focus on that same spot for 10 straight days. And what are we going to see when we do that? Okay, so next slide is the one they took, and that's called the Hubble Deep Field. Do you see all those stars? No, they're not stars. Those are galaxies. So when you take a spot where it seems like there's nothing in the sky, and you focus on it for multiple days, that's what came back. So even most of those, a couple of those are stars. There might be 5 stars in that picture. But most everything else there are galaxies, and they disappear as far as they can into the distance. Wow. We live in a pretty big place. And each one of those is millions or billions of light years away. It's pretty hard to imagine a light year, but a light year is how fast or how far light would travel in a year. And light travels so fast, in 1 second, it zips around the Earth 7 times. Okay, that's pretty amazing. Well, at that speed, it would take perhaps 1 billion years to get to the furthest of those galaxies. And we've seen galaxies that are 13 billion light years away. So pretty amazing in terms of how big the universe is. Okay? So let's go back to that slide, and I want to tell you a story about that because it's interesting. Let's go back like 4 slides if we can. The one that had the picture of the people on it. Okay, this one. Okay, these are 2 people that did a lot to open up our view of the sky. Okay, the top one is a lady named Henrietta Swan Leavitt, and she was a computer. Okay, a computer wasn't the little thing that you has a keyboard on it. It used to be somebody who was really good at math that did math work. And when scientists needed to do some kind of calculation, they didn't have a computer or Excel or a calculator to punch that in. They'd give it to these people and say, go out there and do those calculations. And she started looking at a particular kind of star, and she said, that star gets brighter and dimmer and brighter and dimmer. And if you measure how long it takes to get brighter and dimmer, you know how bright it absolutely is. Okay, and think about when you see a star that's really, really bright, it could be bright for 2 reasons. One is it's close to us, right? So if a star is close to us, it appears to be bright, even if it isn't intrinsically bright. But a star that's very, very far away can be 1,000 times brighter, but not appear as bright as the one that's close to us, right? So in other words, if somebody with a searchlight 20 miles away is shining that at you, and I'm holding a flashlight right in front of your face, my flashlight's going to be brighter. Well, scientists know that if you know how bright something is, you can tell how far away it is. And up until that time, everybody thought that the Milky Way was all there was, that there's nothing beyond the Milky Way. They knew there were fuzzy patches in the Milky Way, but they didn't know what they were. They just thought they were patches of gas. And so Henrietta Swan took this particular kind of star, and she said, I can calculate how far away they are because I know how bright they are, and I know how bright they are by how long it takes to vary from bright to dim, bright to dim, bright to dim. And that's a particular kind of star. Well, the man below is Edwin Hubble. You've heard that name just a second ago. We named a telescope and a whole bunch of things about him. Well, in the 1920s, for the first time, he got a hold of the Mount Wilson telescope, a 100-inch wide telescope, biggest telescope in the world at the time. And he started looking at some of those fuzzy patches. And in particular, he looked at the Andromeda galaxy, and he said, I see some of those stars that Henrietta Swan had figured out, and whoa, they are much, much further away than we thought. Everything in the Milky Way is only at most 100,000 light years away. Well, he calculated the distance to that Andromeda galaxy as being 2.5 million, 25 times that far away. And so at that point, our galaxy went from this big to this big. Okay? And so that's kind of a famous view of how things are. Oh, and I want to give you one more analogy here. I need to step back a little bit. The Milky Way is really big. And I don't have one, but if I had a quarter and I were to set that quarter on the ground, that's how big our solar system is compared to the United States. Nancy just mentioned that we traveled across the United States, and we saw maybe 1% of the country. Okay, we just saw a few miles on each side of the road for 10,000 miles. But if you can imagine the size of a quarter compared to the United States, that's how big our solar system is compared to the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is our local galaxy. And our local galaxy is the size of a grain of sand compared to the United States to the known universe. So tiny, tiny, tiny in terms of everything that's out there. Okay, let's go back forward a few slides. Can we go forward? Sorry about this. You guys are doing great. Okay, that's our deep field again. And one more. Okay, so the conclusion is that, whoa, why would God make a universe so big? What's the point of that? And in 1960, there was a man by the name of Frank Drake. And Frank Drake sat down and he says, if there's this many stars, there has to be other intelligent people out there. There has to be other civilizations out there. And he came up with what's called the Drake equation. And it's that second line there, and don't worry about it. But what he said is, if we know how many stars there are, and how many of those stars are similar to our sun, and how many of those develop planets around them, we can calculate how many smart, intelligent civilizations out there. So in 1960, the SETI program began, and we started looking. What did we find? How many civilizations have we found? 10? None. And in 60 years of looking, we have found 0. And we haven't even found anything that's encouraging. Okay, as a matter of fact, Frank said that there were 6 things that were needed to make an intelligent civilization. And that's what his calculation is based on. We now know that there's over 200 things that make Earth unique and make it possible for us to live here. And if any one of those things were not true, you and I wouldn't be living on this planet. Okay, and when you put those 200 conditions into an equation, you end up with the possibility that there's 1 to 1.5 intelligent civilization in the whole Milky Way. And the whole Milky Way has 100 to 400 billion stars. Okay, and I like to point this out to my students too. The words million and billion are, they seem like big numbers and they kind of meld in our head. Matter of fact, occasionally you'll hear a news person who confuses those two. And they say, oh, it costs $10 million. Oops, $10 billion. Well, there's a huge difference between a million and a billion. A million seconds. How many of you guys are a million seconds old? A million seconds is only 11 days, right? Okay, so less than 2 weeks from now, another million seconds will have passed. How many of you are a billion seconds old? Well, in this group, probably all of us, because a billion seconds is 33 years. So what's the difference between 11 days and 33 years? That's the difference between 1 million and a billion. So our Milky Way has at least 100 billion stars, and I've heard estimates of maybe as many as 1 trillion stars. 1 trillion is 100 billions. So huge, huge, huge. And we now know that it's unlikely that there's anybody else out there. And okay, let's go back one slide. Okay. And so we haven't found anything. So why would God do that? Why would God make it so much bigger than it needs to be? And actually, forward 2. Sorry, making you guys earn your money. Okay, I love this scripture. And it's not one that you usually hear having to do with astronomy, but it's Romans, and it says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what he has made, so that they are without excuse. So what does the universe tell us? It says God is amazing. God is huge. God is powerful. Okay, it expresses the power behind the universe. And God is saying, yeah, I could have made this tiny little earth, but I decided to make it the way I did. And he gave us color. He gave us endless variety of animals and flowers and landscapes. We saw Grand Tetons and Yellowstone and the Badlands and Pikes Peak and all kinds of amazing stuff on our travels. God didn't need to do that. But why did he? So he wanted to impress us. He wanted to show, hey, this is who I am. And the reason why he gave us a universe that is so huge is because he wanted us to just look back and go, oh. And one of the things I have my students do is define the term awe. What is awe? And the best way I have to explain it, how many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? Okay, most of us, okay? And virtually everybody's experience at the Grand Canyon is you go to the edge of the South Rim and they've got a rail there. And you walk up to that rail, that's awe, okay? And I think most of us have done that to one extent or another. When you see that and you just realize, wow, that is what there is. Well, when you see our universe, that's awe. That's what God does for us. That's who our God is. He's the guy who created that. He's the guy who did that. Okay, let's go on to some more scriptures here. I just want to go through these quickly. Psalms 33:6, by the word of the Lord, the heavens were made, the starry host by the breath of his mouth. Isaiah 40:25, to whom will you compare me? Who is my equal, says the Holy One. Lift your eyes to the heavens, starry host one by one, and calls them each by name. By his great strength and great power, not one of them is missing. That's pretty mind-boggling to think that God knows those stars. 400 billion stars in the Milky Way, and maybe that many Milky Ways out there. Okay, we're just one of billions of galaxies, and each galaxy consists of billions or hundreds of billions of stars. Okay, Psalms 8:1. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You set your glory above the heavens. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? And it's mind-boggling to me, this whole issue of, are we the center of creation? The ancients used to think that the earth was in the center and everything revolved around us, right? And they believed that the whole universe was in a little shell that surrounded the earth, like we were inside a bubble and we were the center of that, and that those things were spinning around the earth and the earth was still. Well, that was pretty egoistic or whatever. They just thought we were pretty important, so God had to make us the center of it. Well, when we found out, Copernicus and Galileo and those guys started looking, and they said, well, we're not the center. The sun is the center, and we're out here somewhere. And then people like Hubble started looking out at the universe and said, whoa, we're not even the only galaxy. We're ones of billions of galaxies. Well, it's easy to look at that and feel like we're really not very important. We're just a tiny little speck in this giant immensity out there. But in truth, we are the center of God's attention. And that's the point, is God chose to send his son to this planet to this person, to that person, to that person. And that, in some ways, makes us, or in the most important way, makes us the center of the universe, which is important. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And that's what I just said. Let's go to the next one. And I just want to show you some pictures I took on my vacation. You guys didn't want to come here and see a slideshow, so I've left this to just a few slides. But this is the comet that was just here, Comet Neowise. Did any of you guys see that? You missed something important. Comets are amazing, and they are rare, and they're definitely worth looking at. Okay, so definitely want to, whenever you hear that there's a naked eye comet, you want to see it because it's very rare and cool. Anyway, that's Comet Neowise, and it was here just last month. That was a picture we took from Turkey Run State Park in Indiana. Okay, next slide. And this is called the Trifid Nebula. And this is a picture that I took. Where did I take that? That was taken in Iowa, in a field in the middle of Iowa. And that is just gas, and that's what they call a stellar nursery. New stars are being born there. And a star is just a sun. Our sun is just a star, just kind of an average star, but brand new stars are being born there. And this gas that they're sending out is glowing in different colors depending on the color of it, or the color tells you what it's made of. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is another one that's called the Lagoon Nebula. That was taken also at the same place. And again, it's similar. It's a stellar nursery. And this, as you look at the Milky Way and look towards the south, there's a constellation there called Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the center of our galaxy. You know, the galaxy is round and it has a bulge in the middle. Well, Sagittarius is looking towards that bulge, and this is in Sagittarius. Okay, next slide. And that, actually, it's not a very good one. I probably shouldn't have included that. It's called the Ring Nebula. And what that is a dying star. And when a star dies, it turns into what's called a red giant, and it expands. And as it expands, the outer layers are so far from the center that gravity doesn't hold the gas anymore, and the gas expands outward in a bubble. And so what we're looking at there is the bubble that forms that. And the outside of that bubble is darker because it's thicker as we see it from Earth. And so we see that. It's called a planetary nebula. Okay, next slide. And these are three what they call globular clusters. And globular clusters are groups of concentrated stars that are outside our galaxy. They're actually revolving around our galaxy like satellites. And we probably have thousands of those surrounding the Milky Way. And each one of those have 10,000 to 1 million stars in them. And if we lived on a planet in there, you wouldn't be alive. But if you did, the night sky would never be dark. It would be like having 1,000 Jupiters or Venuses. If you see Venus in the evening sky, 1,000 Venuses in your sky at any given time. So those are pretty impressive. I enjoyed taking pictures of those. Okay, and next one. Okay, and this is actually my favorite photo that I took. And this is a pair of galaxies called the Whirlpool Galaxy. And it's one galaxy feeding into another. That's about 50 million light years away. And you can see the smaller galaxy and the larger galaxy have an arm that's connected, and it's gradually pulling that in, and at some point those two will merge, but probably not anytime soon. So anyway, that's a cool one. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this one, I actually want to advertise something. How many of you saw the eclipse in 2017? Okay, the total solar eclipse. Okay, the total, I tell my students that seeing a partial eclipse is like kissing your sister. Not nearly as exciting as kissing your honey. And when you see a partial solar eclipse, it's okay. But when you see a total solar eclipse, it's totally amazing and very, very rare. If you were to say, I want to see a total solar eclipse, but I'm not willing to travel to see it. So you set a lawn chair in your yard and say, I'm going to wait for it to come to me. On average, you'd have to wait 400 years to see one. And just to let you know how rare they are, Carolyn and I went to see one in 1991, and we went to the tip of Mexico, and that was the last one to hit North America until 3 years ago, in 2017. 2017, one crossed across the whole middle part of the United States. And talk about an awesome experience it was. When the eclipse finished, okay, and what this is the moon passing in front of the sun. And you can see the outer atmosphere of the sun when that happens. And when you see that, it's just amazing. Everybody sits there with their mouth open and go, oh. And this one only lasted, where we were, 1 minute and 22 seconds is all that was. And when the sun came back, everybody was quiet for just a second. And then everybody broke into applause. And I guarantee, if you don't know what awe is, see what this was happening. And part of the reason why I'm saying this is because very rarely another one is coming 4 years from now, or less than 4 years from now. Next slide. And this is where it's going to be. Okay, you can see it goes right up through Mexico, right up through Dallas and San Antonio, all the way up through the corner of Missouri and all those middle states up into New England. And so you got lots of choices where to see it. I guarantee, I tell my students this, if you go to a total solar eclipse and come back and say, okay, I will give you $20. I've never had to do that. And I'm sure I never will, because everybody who goes to see it is just very impressed with what they see. So that's my advertisement. It's April 8th of 2024. And if you can be in the path of that thing, I guarantee it will be a religious experience, because God coincidentally made the moon and the sun look exactly the same size from Earth. Okay, the sun is 400 times the diameter of the moon, but the sun is 400 times further away. Do the math. They're both exactly the same size. And actually, this eclipse is going to be almost 5 minutes long. So this is going to be a much better eclipse than the last one we had. So anyway, go put it on your calendar. April 8th, 2024. So anyway, that's my presentation. I just wanted to share with you, and my real conviction that God created the world as a way to impress us with how amazing he is. Okay? Or God created the universe with a way just to say, hey, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I can create. This is how magnificent I am. It's kind of showing off. And he did a pretty good job with it. Okay, well, thank you.